Hello, I'm your friend over at Floopfisht, and today we're going to be looking into and exploring a long-abandoned ferry and later sealing ship by the means of a great digital recreation. Join me today as we uncover the condition, purpose, and components of the legendary SS Kyle. Okay, this is the SS Kyle. It was a sealing ship slash ferry. It was originally built as a ferry in the mid to late 1910s, and it was beached here in the 60s by ice, and it hasn't been moved since. We're going to be exploring the bow of the ship first, starting off with this funny little thing right at the top of the deck here. This looks to be a windlass or some kind of winch, I guess. I can't really tell from this rendering, but this thing still remains intact, but I'm sure probably a bunch of the other rigging stuff was probably removed over time. Looks like there would have been the holes for the chains here and here. And then we move down the side of the ship. There's the nameplate here, and there would be an identical one on the other side. You can see it there. There's the hawse pipes for the anchors that you could see. Maybe you can't see it right here, and on the other side there's both there. The ship was actually repainted in 1997, which is why it looks in such good condition. The deck itself, you will notice throughout the entire video, is actually in astounding condition considering that it's been abandoned for probably over 50 years, besides some minor holes like this one. Moving a bit further aft, you could see, let me move this around here, there's a cargo hatch. This probably had a cover on it at some point, but it's long been collapsed or removed. I can't also tell, since the rendering was done through something called photogrammetry, I can't tell if this part here along the side of the ship is just damaged, or if that's part of the rendering, like the camera didn't catch that. I don't know. Anyway, it also looks to be that there's some vegetation growing on the deck, as seen behind the cargo hatch. There's some green. And then a bit further back from that, we could see the forward mast. It's still completely intact and still standing strong. This is a pretty recent rendering. I would say it's no more than a year old by the time of recording this. Yeah, the deck is in pretty good condition. We got the front of the superstructure right here. I, again, can't tell if that's from the rendering or not, but it looks to be bowed inwards. And then we move further back just a little bit, and now we're at the superstructure area. The bottom part of the superstructure is in fairly good condition, actually. Little to no collapsing on the lower part, but that all changes when we move up top. This would have been if there was a radio room on board. I don't actually know that. The wheelhouse, chart room, all of this stuff completely collapsed. This part here, as you can see, this is probably all that's left of the wheelhouse. If I had to guess, this is just the bottom of the bulkhead. And some earlier pictures of the ship. There's actually this little block here where you can see that door. Let me try and get a better view of this. Yes, right about here. This little block would have been on top of this deck, and it would have made the ship taller, but due to the gradual degradation of the ship, this entire deck has completely fallen down onto the deck below it, and the wood planking is starting to collapse also. And then we move a little bit further back from this absolute catastrophe. There seems to be a skylight. This would have probably been in the chart room to provide some extra light. And then this right here, look all the way down through the middle of the ship. This if I had to guess, is a engine room vent, because the engine rooms of ships like this would have gotten extremely hot, and vents like this would have been vital to keep the ship from, the engine crew from overheating down there. It would have probably been over 110 degrees in the engine room, so any ventilation is required to keep them cool down there. Probably some cowl vents were mounted on these little circles here, and then we move back here. This is probably more ventilation stuff. I think there's a little skylight up here. Then there's another bigger skylight behind it. That's where the 3 holes are in that thing right there. That's a skylight, I think. Pretty sure. And then, let me look. Oh, that's not good. So, we could see here what looks to be in between perhaps some lifeboat davits. This whole bit of the roof here has completely collapsed. I don't know how recent that damage was. It looks to be fairly recent, though. And then we can move to the other side. There's still some original railing here. I just noticed that. The funnel is completely intact, it looks like. Which is kind of rare for shipwrecks like this. Usually the funnel would have fallen off because it's made out of fairly thin steel, and it would have just rusted through and collapsed. I think I've covered most of that stuff. And then we move back here a little ways. And this thing right here, I can't find any information on what the heck this little block is right here. But perhaps it's like a stairwell, if that's probably a reasonable guess. This thing is in almost pristine condition, actually, unlike the superstructure from earlier that's just completely fallen down. We look back here a little bit further. The superstructure stops along with this little promenade deck here. And then there is another cargo hatch. The aft cargo hatch, also missing its cover. Probably contributed to the degradation of the hull, actually, because water could just flow directly into the ship. And then, as we move a bit further back, more vegetation on the deck. And the aft mast, also still standing strong. This ship was built in, I believe, 1913, so it's over 100 years old. It's truly a shame that they can't save it. Then we can move back here. There's another little deck house. Probably some housing for the crew members. And then I found this pretty interesting. We look back on the very aft deck here, probably, 200 feet back from the bow. And on the very backmost deck, there looks to be the steering gear that's still intact. I don't know if that's where it was originally or not, but directly below this would be the rudder, but that's in the floor, so I can't look at that, unfortunately. This gear would have rotated from a steam engine, and it would have turned to the rudder. And then looks to be this little sort of perhaps a ventilator or skylight right here. Portholes, and I don't know what this thing is. I can't really look at it. There's like a little block right there. Perhaps maybe some mooring equipment or something. And then we're at the counterstern, all the way at the back of the ship. Directly below this looks to be actually perhaps the rudder, like the tiller shaft or whatever that's called, goes down right there. I don't know if that's, again, with the rendering or not. I'd have to look that up. There's a little promenade along this deck house, too. And, yeah. That is the SS Kyle for you. Pretty good condition, considering other shipwrecks of the time period that are wrecked in similar circumstances. But the upper superstructure here, completely gone. That's been standing until fairly recently, actually. There. Anyway. Thank you for exploring the SS Kyle with me today. I thought this would be fun, and I hope you thought it was fun too. You got to look at a ship that you probably haven't heard too much about unless you live in the area. And, yeah. I hope you enjoyed this video, and consider subscribing maybe? I don't know. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you again next time.